Hello there. Today's video, Pro-Revenge. I was told to do what I needed to do, so I did it. This is very recent. I was living in a very bad part of a major metropolitan city that has lots of bad parts. After I moved in, I started noticing a lot of things that were unsafe. Most of the things I brushed aside because they didn't necessarily affect me. 3 things I complained about were the fact that the common areas and most of the bedrooms had no smoke detectors. Then, because I get home when it's very dark, I complained about the porch lights not working. I was promised over and over that this would be fixed, but it never was. I pressed harder and threatened to call the city. I also withheld my rent to this point. The landlord, female, told me, "There's nothing wrong with the house. Do what you need to do." So, I did. I called the city. An inspector came out and I showed him around the property. There were areas I couldn't give him access to, like the garage or the other tenants' rooms. He took lots of pictures and pointed out dozens of safety issues and building code violations. Turns out, this slumlord, referring to the owner, converted a 2-story house, 4-bed, 2-bath, into a 3-story house with 9 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms with no permits from the city. He, the owner, also had the home classified as an owner-occupied, single-family home, although it was clearly not, as there was no owner occupancy and there were 10 unrelated roommates. The landlord, female, harassed me through the whole process. She took my parking spot away and pitted other roommates against me. To make matters worse, she told everyone I wasn't paying rent. So, now I have these bitches ganging up on me. It was so bad that I couldn't be in any of the common areas for even 1 minute without being harassed. I also got a bunch of notices accusing me of random things and an eviction notice because I wasn't paying rent. The report from the city came out and it had over a dozen violations, including some very serious ones. It was going to cost him tens of thousands of dollars to repair the house to get it up to standard. The house started to become safer. There were smoke detectors, railings for the stairs, working porch lights, a carbon monoxide alarm, and he was forced to put a railing on a balcony that had none. Through all of this, he's, the owner, making $10,000 per month in rent, charging for parking, and there's another large house on the property that he's renting. Plus he, the owner, has multiple homes, 90 tenants in total. This guy, the owner, was making tons of money, but somehow the sentiment among some of the roommates was, "How could you do this to this poor old man, the owner?" My case went to court, and I got more time to find legal help. By the time the second hearing came along, another notice had been given as they got access to the entire house. Plus, they were still in violation and had not cured all of the problems, so they got fined daily. Then my court date was a week away, and his attorney started to try and negotiate with me. I was asking for $16,000 and they knew I was going to get it because they were going to lose. I ended up settling for $7,000 and 30 days to move out, plus 8 months of rent forgiveness. I just did what I had to do. Lol. Edit: some people are calling this post fake because of the fact that I've referred to a male and a female in my post. The landlord manager is female and the owner is male. It's pretty common for the owner of a home to hire someone to manage the properties, especially since this owner has 90 tenants. I'm not sure what's so suspicious about that. So now, I've gone through and put notes throughout my post to help the people with reading comprehension issues who are so stuck in every little detail that they are missing the big picture. Hope everyone can stop complaining about this now. Edit 2: I've learned a lot from the multiple times I've dealt with awful landlords. Living in Los Angeles with the huge problem with slumlords, you start to learn your rights and get sick of the shot and report it. So, I will always withhold rent if my rights are being violated or the house is unsafe and the owner-landlord refuses to do anything about it. And for those that are saying he got off easy, it's so much easier to get rent forgiveness than money. Many people advise against withholding rent, but it has worked in my favor every single time because it either got the landlord to make repairs or it got the landlord to take me to court and I got a settlement and rent forgiveness. Example, in this case, it was much easier for the owner to swallow $7,000 plus 8 months of rent forgiveness than $15,000. I originally asked for $16,000, so that's just $1,000 less, in essence, than what I asked for. So, no. He didn't get off easy here. It would be different if I was harmed by his neglect, but I wasn't. Plus, usually the only way you get money from an eviction case is by settling. Eviction judges are there to determine evictions, not give out money. Yes. There are exceptions, but I would have, most likely won, and not gotten evicted because I would agreed to move, but to get money, you usually have to take them to court separately and get a new attorney. It's so much easier to settle. In fact, at the initial hearing the judge orders you to go out in the hallway and negotiate before you go to plead your case. Judges much prefer when agreements are made. They also tend to throw out cases when the landlord and/or their attorney is trying to be manipulative and/or unreasonable, and the tenant doesn't have legal representation. Judges hate to evict people, especially in Los Angeles. Poaching threats and frogs, lots and lots of frogs. This is another story about Pops, my grandfather, and how he got some sweet revenge on dun squatters poachers. This goes way back to the 90s, to be exact 1998. I was 10 years old. My farm back then was Pop's family farm. It's way up north in Ontario. My farm is not a small farm in the area, it's the biggest plot of land, not only that it has the most workable farmland. There's about 80 acres of good workable farmland that's including pastures, and another 120 acres of dense forest and marshland. It is northern Ontario. Back in the 90s, northern Ontario had a breakout of this type of moth. They would spin silk high in the trees. Really, they caused no harm other than a nuisance, but the government had the great idea to crop dust the forests on Ontario, causing an ecological disaster. With the loss of the moths and the chemicals in the water, a type of frog was nearly wiped out. We called them leopard frogs. They are rye green with these big black spots on them. After that, they were put on the endangered species list. The back end of my property runs off into a small marshland and into the lake and back. In the 90s, Pops was having a problem with poachers. They were camping in the back area, hunting out of season, killing and eating turtles out of the marsh, and just fucking up the property. Back in the day, that forest was my playground. I know that area like the back of my hand, but unfortunately I had a run-in with the poachers. They threatened to shoot a 10-year-old child. Of course, I went out there with Pops and our local lawman, but they had packed up and were gone before we got there. Unfortunately, they returned a week after we could hear the rifle shots. Pops tried to find them with the lawman several times, but with no luck. Now here's where all the information from the start comes into play. Pops, as hard as he tried, wanted them gone, but it wasn't working. Pops was also a fisherman and his favorite bait were bone other than the leopard frog. But because they made it on the endangered species list, the use was outright banned. Pops, being the responsible fisherman and generally caring about the land, figured, oh hell knows the time to kill two birds with one stone. He approached the Canadian Fishery and Game Wardens and through a lot of work got in touch with an ecological survey team who decided that our little marsh was the perfect place for a spawning pool to raise little leopard frogs. And that's what happened. The back area, where our marsh was fenced in, and they started breeding tadpoles to brood in our marsh. Not only that, the poachers' hunting ground happened to fall in the protected zone. Once the work happened, it took a full year for the poachers to return. But Pops had a weapon now, his phone. Once he could hear that familiar sound of rifles going off where no rifle fire should be, he made a single phone call to the game warden. They had over a dozen wardens up there in less than an hour, and the poachers were caught. Not only were they caught with the carcass of a bear and other animals, they were found with buckets and buckets of our little leopard frogs. They were caught, but not only did they hunt without a license, they also poached an endangered species to be used as an illegal bait. From what learned through the locals, they did 2 years in big-time prison. All because Pops cared about the little froggies. Oh yeah, over 5 million of the frogs were raised on that marsh over 10 years, being released through marshes and forests in Ontario. You would have a hard time finding a leopard frog across Ontario that was not somehow related to a frog that came out of my little marsh. Tried to throw me under the proverbial bus, ran herself over. I was building an online training module at work that is intended to teach existing users how to work a new process. It has interactive elements, quizzes, segments to work through a few sample scenarios, etc. Now we'd recently got a new associate director who, from what I can tell, advanced through the company by throwing other people under the bus. She gets promoted not for her own merits, but because at the end of the day she has less mud sticking to her than other applicants. It's uncanny to the point that there simply had to be more to it than stupid office politics. I'll get to that in a bit. So after I have the first draft of the module done, it gets sent out for the usual round of testing, and there are of course a couple things that need to be corrected. I build the module off the notes the subject matter experts leave me, and a few things inevitably get lost in translation. But this new associate director just rips it to shreds, complaining that it's completely incomprehensible, needs to go into much greater detail, asking questions about nearly every individual mouse click in the sample scenarios, and overall stating that it's impossible to follow. The thing is, this module is intended for our finance department, for people who have a background in finance and have already been trained on how to use our internal software. She is a training services associate director with a teaching background. The module isn't supposed to make sense to a former middle school social studies teacher. It's supposed to make sense to people with finance degrees. I push back and try explaining this to her in a million different ways, but she's having none of it. So I have to go back to the subject matter experts with her 20 pages worth of criticism. And at first they think I'm joking. I had to forward her email before they finally believed me. So for the next 2 weeks we're going over every nuance, including readdressing everything that was covered during their 3-week classroom training. How to set up their network drives, how to set up Outlook, including things as nuanced as if you don't know how to set up your email signature, click here. I mean really basic stuff that has nothing to do with what the module was originally supposed to teach. But I now had to include it all because our new associate director couldn't find the on switch if you stapled her finger to it. This wastes my time, the subject matter expert's time, and time spent re-recording all the voice work. If you've done voice work in the past, you know you never get it in one take. After it's all done, I send it back out for review and approval, and the associate director simply doesn't respond. A week passes. The finance director takes an interest in why this module is almost a month overdue. I go to forward the associate director's email again, except now I can't find it. But, seeing as how I have a hoarding problem when it comes to email, I check with one of the subject matter experts I was working with. He can't find it either. Turns out, none of us can find it. It's gone, so I check with a friend of mine in it who, after a little detective work, discovers that a week ago someone did a compliance delete on the Exchange server. This basically is a seek and destroy for messages meeting certain criteria. In this case, a specific phrase she used in her email. I start digging through Outlook trying to find particular emails related to this that might be used to defend my actions, and they're all gone. Inbox, sent items, deleted items. Every last one of them. Any email containing that particular phrase anywhere in it. This kind of thing is normally used by admins to mass delete spam or phishing emails from all users at once. Except in this case, someone apparently deleted emails that showed evidence of her awful decisions. My friend in it can smell a juicy story a mile away and was very interested in seeing where this went. She recovered the deleted emails and I promptly saved them to a flash drive. For the next few days, every time I had any email with this associate director's name on it, even unrelated stuff, you never know how something might fit together, I saved a copy to the flash drive. I informed the subject matter experts to do the same, and we started building our offline evidence locker. I didn't want to blow the lid on it just yet. I wanted to see if my suspicions were correct. Maybe a lifetime of watching spy movies and cop dramas had corrupted my thinking. Maybe there was another explanation. Who knows, it could happen. I'm not God, I don't know everything. I'll play defense. So after several weeks in total trying to appease this associate director's unquenchable thirst for irrelevant details and then getting ignored for a week, she finally publishes it and sends it to the finance director to approve so it can go live. Woo! Except the module, which was supposed to be a 30-minute online course, now contained 3 hours of content and went down several irrelevant rabbit holes that had been deemed critical supporting information. As an analogy, imagine designing a training module to teach a nurse how to enter some new CPT codes and being told you have to teach him how to read too because he might not know what words are. That's how much BS was rammed into this thing. And the finance director of course hated it and was surprised that such a rambling mess of a module would come from me of all people. So he calls a meeting with me and the associate director on Tuesday to get some answers, and sure enough she immediately tried to distance herself from it. Tried to paint it as she made a couple suggestions and I clearly went way overboard. How I must have sent her a different version that she approved and switched them afterwards. That's not even possible. It would get thrown back into a draft status. She kept trying to talk over me as I voiced my defense, and to his credit the finance director finally just muted her so I could speak. And boy did I explained everything. I shared my screen, popped in my flash drive, and opened my copies of the emails that had supposedly been deleted. Every email exchange where she complained about the material, I pushed back, and she flat out ordered me to build the module in the way I did. She abruptly left the meeting and went offline. The finance director asked if I could send him a copy of all relevant files, and as I did, so I told him they might not be there later. And then explained what I had learned about someone in it using the compliance delete. He assures me he'll look into it, and the shit immediately hit the fan. The associate director never logged back on. There was a massive internal audit where people from her previous departments were asked to provide statements. Leadership tried to keep it hush-hush, but you just can't keep something that big under wraps. I don't know the specific whats and hows, but the associate director and one of the managers had both left the company to pursue the next stage of their careers, and we sincerely wish them the best. I don't really do the social media thing, but over the next few days as the rumor mill did, what rumor mills do, I heard their shit absolutely blew up, and it came out that the associate director and the manager were having an affair. Now this all went down about a month ago, but as I wrote this post I thought to check online court records. Both are now facing divorces, filed by their respective spouses. So yeah, there's a void in my direct leadership, and the entire department is getting a shakedown by information security to determine if there were any other leaks. I spent some time reflecting on why this whole series of events happened, and my best guess is she wanted to make a grand entrance by spearheading this masterwork training module that covered every possible scenario and contained any and all information anyone could possibly want. Then as she started to realize how wasteful, rambling, and unnecessary it was, she realized that her grand entrance would be a grand faceplant. So she tried to erase the evidence and pin all the nonsense on me to save face, but inadvertently set in motion the events that would expose her little arrangement with the manager. Taking it up the ass in order to cover her ass, I guess. That all, folks. If you like this content, please subscribe, hit the like button, and check out my next video. Take care.